Good afternoon and welcome to The Hub, the AQR's regular series of webinars. I'm Ken Parker, the coordinator of these events, and I'm delighted to welcome William Landell Mills from TNS Global, who's going to take us through his thoughts on the ideal man. Webinar will take about 30 minutes and we'd welcome your questions or comments. Each of these will be addressed individually within the next day or two. I think I'm right in saying, William, is that right?
Yeah.
Thank you very much, sir. So sit back, relax, and let William take you through the ideal man.
Thanks, Ken. Okay, right. So,
yeah, just finding the first chart is always the issue. There it is. It's there. A bit further across, a bit further, right to the right, to the right, to the excellent.
There we go. Brilliant, brilliant. Yeah, so I'm going to talk to you about our study that we've done globally in TNS over the last year or so, looking at the ideal man. And so there's been a team, including Mike Griffiths and myself and lots of local experts who, have worked with us to try and understand the kind of construction, if you like, of what the ideal man is. Just to be clear, right from the outset, we're not really talking about the ideal man as you would understand it in common parlance. We're really talking about the ideal in the sense of the kind of Weberian ideal type, and it's actually a bit of a mistranslation. It's really all about the idea of man, and what we have got to do to unlock this really are a set of deep questions that we've evolved to really unearth the implicit nature of the way different cultures construct their idea of man. So I'll start with a metaphor, if you like. The problem we face when we're trying to unlock culture is that in an important sense, culture is invisible. And what I mean by that is that, if you just have, if you've never left your village, you don't think you've necessarily got an accent. You don't know what an accent is until you go visit a town somewhere else and they kind of laugh at you because you've got a funny accent. Or, I mean, another example is if you're Brit. I mean, I was just talking to a lady who just come here from South Africa, was talking about recently something really struck her, that she, there'd been an issue about a knifing where an English head teacher had been stabbed, and there was a big brouhaha about having a knife amnesty a couple of years back. And she thought this was hysterical because in South Africa, where she came from, knife amnesty, that's so tame. And you would never kind of, you kind of have implicit assumptions about these kind of things. So what we're trying to do is really surface some of these implicit assumptions. And we've got this, Mike Griffiths in Shanghai's anthropologist, developed this framework of thinking, if you like, drawing from social science. And I'm going to talk you through that framework because it'll make everything that we say later much more sensible. And there are these 6 different questions. First, there's embeddedness. Now, to understand embeddedness, it's useful to use this metaphor around a goldfish. So a goldfish, if you like, has no sense of of the water that it's in. But if you're outside the goldfish bowl, you can see the water very clearly. So what that implies is that you don't see the culture around you. There are implicit rules. So embeddedness, therefore, needs to be surfaced and made explicit in that way. The goldfish metaphor comes in because when you then think about, okay, the fish is in the water, what does that mean about how it swims about? So its modus operandi, the way it operates in society, is a function. What we call is the equivalent of how a fish swims about. Its X factor is all about how it wins, how it actually gets to that food faster than another fish, and what makes it win. Its ultimate purpose, this is the idea of, what is life all about, the meaning of God, materiality, and how people confront death. Obviously, the fish metaphor falls down slightly there, but the fifth one, the idea of femininity. So how is man constructed in, masculinity in contradistinction to femininity? And then lastly, how are men, how are men with other men? How do they behave? How do they operate in that context? So by taking these 6 deep sociological questions, we actually find a way of comparing cultures in a way in which we're comparing apples with apples, if you like. So to make it a bit more concrete, so you understand broadly what the construct is, just to talk through a few of the cultures that we've looked at. What you see on this chart down the left-hand side are the 6 big questions we asked about culture: the embeddedness, the modus operandi, the X factor, his ultimate purpose, what he is like contrasted to women, and how he is with other men. And so those 6 big questions. And then I'm going to talk very briefly through the ideas about how different cultures answer those deep questions. So let's start with China. And so when we're talking about the embeddedness in China, and we have that word or that code to describe that, the word circumspect. What we mean by that really is that when you think about China, it's this vast, homogeneous, very, but highly collective culture, but in which there is very low levels of trust. And in China, there aren't these big, clear demarcators that you find in certain other cultures. So people kind of, their social position, if you like, can shift in the blink of an eye. As someone different walks in the room, there's really quite a radical tension. So people have to be very kind of on their guard and cautious, if you like, and circumspect in their relations with others. It's kind of defining feature. So if you're in that society, going on to modus operandi, your way of operating has to be strategic and prudent. If you're then looking on the X factor, I mean, there we think about the importance of classical training and Tai Chi and these kind of the importance of exams in China. So where you have this situation where there aren't these clear demarkers, people become defend themselves, if you like, by developing their individual skills to a very high in quite a classically recognized way. And so that's the idea of self-improvement. In terms of the ultimate purpose, that's the reference to the idea of, in some sense, from a Western, if you like, point of view, China can seem very materialistic in the sense that there isn't a creator myth, and there's a universe that's harmonious, and people kind of save up to buy a big gold Buddha to create a if you like, insurance policy for death, and to buy, if you like, buy goodwill. So the idea of banking capital, but materiality, it has a reality in there. It's kind of a psychic reality in China that operates in the spiritual plane. The vis-a-vis femininity, if you're looking at China, you see the harmony. It's very striking compared to other cultures that the men do not necessarily seem particularly manly. If you think back to like Mao, there were those men and women all wearing kind of his and hers Mao suits. There's a certain what can be seen as androgynous, or that's obviously a construct. But the code we use for looking at that is kind of harmonious and ambiguous and harmonious. And then with other men, there's a kind of breaking free of this circumspection, a kind of feast, competitive feasting is a really important deal. And so taking all, I know that there's a rattling through of some really, really big issues, but the point of this is then when we come to contrast it and look at the different answers that another culture comes up with to these questions. So looking at India. In India, well, India has these massive, great social infrastructures around caste and gender, so really tightly defined. So a person who's born into that culture finds herself in a situation whereby they're rule-bound, they're dutiful. And in that situation, the way, because it's highly trammeled, the way you get what you want, you achieve, that have to operate, is actually through assertion. And we talk about that in terms of being egotistical and proud. Then you've got all this situation whereby, if you look at China, the values in the guy that are really highly, they're seen as the secret to winning, if you like, very far from being this self-improving type, Tai Chi type thing that we see in China. It's actually much more about smarts and adaptation to the impossible situation, finding quick fixes, that kind of thought. Then we get into the ultimate purpose and what the meaning of life is about, and there's actually, whereas in China there's this kind of idea that materiality has a kind of radical reality. In fact, in India, reality, the kind of material reality, is seen as something much more as an illusion that you transcend and move beyond. Vis-a-vis femininity, if you think of the way men and females are portrayed in India, we have much more of a, if you like, it's clear demarcation. The female very, very female, the guy super macho, super muscular, and that sense of distinction is very, very clear. And we'll show you some advertising that sort of illustrates that in a bit. And then when guys are all together, there's this kind of, again, a breaking free of this sort of role-bound, and there's a kind of almost a sense of craziness that takes on, and there's kind of sense of being unleashed, which can even be, borderline kind of dangerous. When we then go to let's jump to America, and you think about the founding myth in America. Well, not the founding myth, but the foundations of America, the Pilgrim Fathers. You go through that, the idea that America was set up a place where you could be religiously free, where you could be follow your faith, and that kind of where you have the writing of the Constitution, which was kind of very about the rights of man. You have the the abolition movement, the civil rights movement, right up to Obama. There's this sense of explicit moral good that is kind of very clearly written into the story there, and it's very evident that you need to talk in those terms, and that's a very unique thing about America, that the explicitness of the kind of moral message. When we talk about the modus operandi, how does the American guy have to operate? It's all about honest endeavor and trying hard, and there's underneath that kind of sense that if you try hard, you'll be rewarded. The X factor, what actually gets people to win? I mean, it's actually we sort of can-do optimism, this thought that if you just believe enough, it's kind of almost an act of faith, kind of implicit in the American dream. You work hard, you strive, that's what will make you win. Ultimate purpose, we talk about this in terms of leaving his mark on the world. So I thought it was when Mark Zuckerberg just left his all his shares in Facebook, has given to charity, as did Bill Gates, and this is about leaving a mark, and quite literally in the case of Mount Rushmore, you see the great American presidents being literally into the mountainside, and I mean that's something that the Germans would never do in the Alps, for example. It's a very kind of vivid image now. Versus femininities, he's the American's rugged and romantic, and with other guys it's all about support, backup, the buddy movies, that kind of thing. So again, if we we're going to come back to some examples of these, so you don't have to remember all of this because we're going to we've got some notes reminding later on, but the British guy is is different. More like the Americans than the other cultures, but different. He's much more implicit. It's about being decent and appropriate. His operation is moderate and good-natured. He wins. His X factor is kind of pragmatic and being imaginative through, you think of, the great inventors, the Dysons and the Bransons and all those kind of clever thinker, and Brunel, those kind of clever thinker-uppers of things. His ultimate purpose is to, we say, kind of in a quite secular sense, live a good life, to look back, feel that you have a good conscience. Versus his femininities, the really distinctive thing about Britishness here is the idea about being, he's not a macho. It's impossible to be macho in British culture for a man. He's actually much more. He's respectful. He's ironic. He's always kind of, deflating his own machismo, and that's quite deliberate. With other men, here it's all about witty banter, and I think to understand witty banter is actually quite a sort of sharp edge to banter. It's kind of quite it's kind of joshing with other guys, but actually kind of taking the piss out of them. There's a certain cruelty to it, and again, this is a kind of contrast to the basic decency with which we have to normally, behave. It's just a kind of, when we're together, we can actually break that rule and be a bit mean. And so, for example, you think about Top Gear, and you think of all the guys on Top Gear and how they're a perfect bunch of English guys who are all there together, but they're actually quite nasty to each other. And that's what we quite enjoy about it. And it's kind of very, very much on code, as they say. So that's a sort of whistle-stop tour of 4 enormous great cultures. And but hopefully that gives you a sense of, by looking through those codes taken together, the kind of character, there's a fundamental difference of character, and it's delivered by looking at these deep questions. So, I mean, another kind of validation of this, if you think in terms of, these sets of words taken together. So, if you're thinking of, America, you're thinking of this guy who's got righteous purpose, who's full of honest endeavor, he's got a can-do optimism, yes, we can. He leaves his mark on the world, rugged, dramatic, and it's about supportive and backup. And you can see kind of that, if I just say to you, Obama plays to many of those codes, leaving aside the polarization around that in America. And then you think of Cameron, we're thinking of decent and appropriate, moderate and good-natured, pragmatic and imaginative, lives a good life, respectful, ironic, witty banter. You could see that Cameron wouldn't make a great president of the United States, and equally Obama really wouldn't fit here very well. And then we look at India, think of someone like Modi. I don't know how much people know about that, but this idea, being role-bound, kind of egotistical and proud, smart and innovative. He's all about, sorting out business. He's a holy guy. He's got a holy background. He's about transcendence, but he's actually got quite a violent history. That machismo and Unleashed certainly would speak to that. And so, in a sense, the national leaders, and we found with Germany, with all the markets, that if you take all these codes and you kind of think of them in those terms, they do serve as a kind of pen portrait, if you like, of the national leader, which is unsurprising. I mean, we never set out to do that, but you think, why do people select a national leader? And you look at Berlusconi and you look at the Italian codes, I can't do here, but it's very telling. It's very telling that people are choosing people in their culture's own image, as I guess you'd expect them to. If we, what I then want to do is move on. So I think thinking of these things in the abstract, we tried to give examples, but this film, American Sniper, is actually, I went to see it with my son a few months ago, and having just worked on this, and I was really, really struck by how vividly this film expressed some of those codes about the American man. So let's just watch them and just see what they actually look like when you're confronting them in the face.
Let me ask you a question, Chris. Would you be surprised if I told you that the Navy has credited you with over 160 kills? Do you ever think that you might have seen things, done some things over there that you wish you hadn't?
Oh, that's not me, no.
What's not you?
I don't tell you enough. I'm so proud of you. You're such a great father.
So you're not worried about what might happen?
I'm willing to meet my creator and answer for every shot that I took.
I'll pick it up.
So what, are you in Germany or where?
I'm stateside.
You're home? What are you doing?
I guess I just needed a minute. The thing that haunts me are all the guys that I couldn't say. Hey, get to my daughter, please, right now. I'm ready. Oh my God. I'm ready to come home.
So, I mean, I remember watching that and seeing, I mean, those American codes, the sense of righteous purpose. I mean, he goes off to fight in Iraq because he wants to stop terrorists getting to Idaho or wherever it was he's from. Right at the beginning, his dad is telling him, "I don't want you to be a, you know, I don't want you to be a." There are three types of guys. There are wolves, there are sheep dogs, and there are sheep. And I don't want you to be a wolf, and you're certainly not going to be a sheep. So he was, you know, he was kind of primed right from the beginning to have righteous purpose, honest endeavor. He has the record for the number of kills, 350, whatever it was. He has can-do optimism. He totally believes in his abilities. He leaves his mark on the world. There's this enormous funeral cortege. He's rugged and romantic with the lady, and it's all about supportive backup. And like those guys, and there's one regret is he doesn't save enough of his own guys. I mean, he is absolutely. Now, it's not to say that it's a big film, big hit globally, but in America, it's a product of American culture. That is only ever going to be a product of American culture. And I think the point about this analysis, you can see the mechanisms that are lying behind it and what gives it this kind of power that you kind of think, oh, that's a good film. But actually, it's really, really configured, unconsciously, of course, but to hit all those hot buttons. That's why Clint Eastwood such genius. Going on. I don't know how.
Let me ask you a question, Chris.
Page down. Sorry, wrong button. So what I want to do now is, go through some some of the advertising from those 4 countries, and just give you an example of what this stuff actually means when you get away from, you know, watching films and that kind of stuff, but actually doing the job of the day. So here we have some print ads that are around in Britain at the moment, and I think, you know, just, you know, there's the Pour Homme, Stella Artois, the Take Courage, my friend, with the chap. I mean, you've got to feel sorry for him. I mean, so, and, you know, are you beach body ready? Which is clearly, you know. So what we have in here is, you know, where, you know, decent. It's fairly decent. It's within the world a bit. It's good natured. It's kind of pragmatic. Sure, it's good, but it's all about living a good life. Sure, but where we're really seeing it kicking in is kind of this irony, loads of irony, and loads of, you know, showing a guy kind of fearful like that, in a sense, is not many cultures, men will tolerate that. And in terms of the witty banter, there's all kind of that kind of non-stop kind of ribbing and piss taking. So that's the British. So, and then America, I mean, very, you know, close cultural cousins and all. But here, let's think, those codes are about, well, righteous purpose, honest endeavor, can-do optimism, want to leave his mark. Well, I mean, here, we particularly get to the masculinity, the idea of being rugged and romantic. You can see that really powerfully here. Supportive backup. I mean, I think it's very telling that Budweiser, the buddy, have a bud on us and all that, why that's such an iconic brand, because it really ties into that notion of guys together, and, you know, which is just not how men together in England would ever operate. It's always a bit more edgy, a bit more tangled, a bit more edge to it in the UK. Looking at going to China now, and again here, now we've, the code being about being circumspect, being strategic and prudent, self-improving, banking capital, amongst, with the women being ambiguous yet harmonious, and the guys together all being about ebullient success. Now, here you see, I think one of the striking things here is the place and the role of women as, kind of being there on equal terms with the men, which is not to say that in China it's a kind of a non-sexist society, but in the world of beer and the presentation, there is much more harmoniousness in the presentation, and I think that would, be very different to how women are portrayed in the American, British, and actually in the Indian, where we come on. And here, I would strongly recommend you have a look at some of these Indian films, because they're absolutely brilliant. But here is just to show some of the key images. Bear in mind, in India, you're not actually to advertise beer itself, but the brands are allowed to form, express themselves through other media and through other, some of the softer drinks. But these are beer brands. And here the guy is, well, is he role-bound? Yeah, dutiful, yeah, egotistical and proud, certainly. There's a bit of transcendence is not particularly in evidence here, but certainly the macho is, and I think the unleashed with the knockout is there. So again, hopefully this is kind of bringing a sense of how different cultures are taking a completely similar identical product, and culturally framing it, in their own way. So the last thing I'm going to do is just show you a British beer film from the World Cup, and the question I'm going to give you is, watch this film, and then I want you to think, if this film were to be dubbed into Cantonese, China, or Mandarin, or played into an dubbed into American directly, how would it play out? But here, let's just watch this film, a British film, and then go back to the other question.
It's good, but it's not quite Carling.
Carling, refreshingly perfect.
Okay, so I think, I'm going to be quick now because we're almost out of time, but I think it's pretty obvious the English codes which are evident there, the irony, the joking, the banter, he's trying to live a good life. He's kind of, he's got that practical, imaginative, James Bond type solutions. And we get the sense that he's kind of decent and appropriate. You don't doubt that. But so going back to that thought experiment, how would that work in China if you just dubbed that over? How would that work in the States if you dubbed that over? And I think, just to think, the way he's such a blunderer, I think, in China would be hard to swallow, perhaps. And in America, there's smaller things, but, again, he's he's leaving work early. You kind of think, well, maybe that's fine, maybe it's not. But anyway, I think, it's there just to make the point that we can have global propositions, we can have global brands, of course we can, but we need to look at the details, and the devil's in the detail, and the kind of way that these little things are expressed that make them actually work appropriately.
Well, that's fantastic. Thank you very much, William. I really enjoyed that. Thank you. And thank you all for attending. As I said earlier, please send in your questions and comments, and these will be answered within the next day or two. If you want to see this webinar again, or if you want a colleague to see it, we'll be uploading a recording on the AQR website within a couple of weeks. So keep your eyes feasted and you'll see it. And finally, a couple of AQR notices, parish news if you like. A couple of things to look out for. The Not the Christmas Party, the legendary Not the Christmas Party, is on the 10th of February this year. Tickets are limited and booking is actually proceeding very quickly at the moment, so please get in quickly. It's at the Ivy, and I think that's probably why the bookings are going so quickly. So 10th of Feb, please be there. In January, apparently, is going to be a membership survey. Please look out for it and please answer it. Don't forget, we are researchers. You know, we do kind of do things ourselves and ask people questions. So why not do it ourselves and ask ourselves questions? So please do answer it. And the last thing to mention is the next AQR webinar will be on the 15th of January. It's on ethnography, and it's been run by Gillian Thomas, who also has a very strong academic background. So that's it, as this is the final webinar this year. Merry Christmas and Merry festivities. And thank you once again, William. Thank you. Bye-bye now.